Tea time with librarians. Welcome everyone to Tea Time with Librarians. My name is Lacey Klemm and I'm the Northwest Regional Coordinator for the Indiana State Library. And our guest today is Jamie Dunn, also from the Indiana State Library. Jamie, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Are you ready to spill some tea?
Sure.
I don't have any tea, I've got water, but it works the same.
I have water too. I had coffee earlier though.
Haven't had my coffee yet. Probably need a little caffeine, but I'll get that later. So to start, please give us your title and a brief description of what you do at the Indiana State Library.
I'm the Genealogy Division Supervisor, and I've been here at the State Library for 11 years in the Genealogy Division, 6 years as a librarian and 5 years as supervisor. And I am in charge of our genealogy collection. I work with our staff to develop the collection, to acquire new books, and the boring supervisory stuff like making schedules and whatever. But I also do a lot of the librarian side of it as well. So I answer reference questions. I have desk shifts. I work on a lot of projects with our collections. I've been working on inventorying and reorganizing our genealogy records on microfilm for 10 years now. There's over 15,000 reels of film. That's why it's taking so long.
Wow.
I'm working with a collection of land records right now that we recently acquired, inventorying them. They are about Marion County and they cover the 1820s to the 1960s. So it's a really cool collection. So just working on different projects like that and making sure that we have everything we need so that we can help patrons with their research, whether they're researching more their own family history or broader history and context of their family, or looking for more recent records, especially that we do a lot of work with people who are looking for their own records for various reasons, for documentation purposes or whatever.
I got a little taste of genealogy when I worked for the East Chicago Public Library,
Mhm.
and we had a East Chicago room, so people would come and try to find different things, and so it's I it's interesting because you can definitely go down a rabbit hole of trying to
Mhm.
find your information, and when you do find something, then you find other things. So, um,
Yes.
ours was a lot of donation based. People would donate. So, is that kind of the same thing with your collection? Is it a lot of donations that you get?
Yeah. We are getting donated collections on a regular basis, whether it's books people have written and had published, either self-published or with a publishing company, or just loose papers of people's research and family photographs and that kind of thing. We take both kinds of collections. And then we do also purchase books that have been formally published. There's several genealogical publishing companies in the US that strictly focus on family history. So it's a good mix because that gives us access to a wide variety of collections because you never know what book is going to be helpful to the researchers. So we try to collect a wide variety of things, not just Indiana related materials.
hmm That that's great. It's good to know that people can donate, but then also that you're actively finding other collections to bring in as well. Because, like I said, it's you just kind of deep dive into that research, and then you're
Uh-huh.
just off to the
Yep.
races with going here, going there, and
Yep.
it
And
was always really interesting to see people's history once they really kind of did a deep dive into it.
yes. And sometimes your research answers your questions and sometimes it just gives you more questions.
That's true. It does.
But it's like being a detective, which is what makes it fun.
Mhm. Very much so, and you have to have a lot of patience too when you're doing
Yes.
genealogy, because like you said, it can be so many more questions after you've finally answered
Yes.
one. So,
And that's what's so fun about being a genealogy librarian because a lot of us also do our own genealogy, but you get really familiar with your own family. So it's really interesting to learn about other people's families when you're helping patrons and just looking at like their experiences and what their ancestors did. My people moved to Indiana in 1803 and never left. So finding people whose families migrated all over the place, it's a different kind of research than what I do for my own family. And
mhm.
it's just really fun to see all the different things that people have done over the years. Especially sometimes you get into like people's family drama and stuff from like 100 years ago, and that's always really fun. Um,
Yeah, some of those stories, where, yeah, they're
mhm.
a
Yep.
little juicy. Yeah, some of it
Yep.
was.
Yep.
So yeah, it was pretty fun to do that. But I have a lot of respect for genealogy librarians because you guys just really take the time to help the patron get what they need. So I mad respect to you guys. So I see that the Indiana State Library website is named one of the 75 best state websites in the Family Tree magazine for 2024. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? Because I didn't know that, and I think that's super cool.
Yeah. So Family Tree Magazine is just a magazine that publishes articles to help people with their research, tell people about resources. And every year they do the best like commercial-based websites and the best state and to some degree local websites that are published by libraries and government entities. And the 2025 list hasn't come out yet, but as long as I've worked here, we've made the state best state website list, I think, every year. And so it's just recognizing the resources we've put on our website. We've produced a lot of databases in-house. They're on our website. They're free. We've digitized a lot of things from our collections, especially people's original research and original photographs. They're in the State Library digital collections. And so um, it's just really awesome to be on that list and to get the word out about what we have. Indiana's the crossroads of America. And so we find a lot of even people who don't live here now, their ancestors were here at some point. Like it seems like everybody came through Indiana. And so just being able to get that word out to people of what we have and what we can help people with is really great.
Yeah, I think that when I was looking into uh what kind of questions I wanted to ask today. When I saw that on the website, I was like, "Oh, that's really neat. I didn't know that." So that's cool that we are one of the 75 best state websites, and hopefully, fingers crossed, will be on 2025.
Yes.
So what is one genealogy resource that you would like Indiana residents to know more about?
I couldn't narrow it down to just one.
Okay.
And I have three. But a big part of that is it depends on what you're researching. Different resources are useful to different people, depending on whether they have your family in them or not. But I think three really cool things that we have in our collection is we have the original census mortality schedules. So the US federal census has been done every year every 10 years, sorry, since 1790. But in 1850, 1860, 1870, and 1880, they did mortality schedules where they asked about anyone who had passed away in each household in the past 12 months from the date they did the census. And at some point, the Census Bureau returned the original records to the states. And so we have the original handwritten records for Indiana. We've digitized them, they're on our digital collections. But they tell you things like they tell you what date a person died, they tell you what they died from, they tell you how old they were, their race, their gender. And so those are really helpful because Indiana didn't issue death certificates until 1882, and they were
Really?
optional until 1907. So
Wow.
this is a really great resource because it's giving you death information. I mean, it only covers that 12-month period, so it's not widely useful, but it's just really cool that it's giving you something that you can't get anywhere else. And it also, there's population level information in there of like, this area had a cholera outbreak in the past 12 months, or this area is really swampy and everybody's getting malaria, or just things
Yeah.
like that. So it's just a really interesting like snapshot of how people lived and what kind of illnesses were going around back then. So those are really cool. Another really awesome resource we have for genealogists is actually held by our Indiana division, but it's our newspaper collection. We have the largest collection of Indiana newspapers in the world. And we've digitized quite a few of them through Hoosier State Chronicles, which is our free online newspaper platform anybody can access online. But we have way more that aren't digitized because they're in copyright or just because it's a massive undertaking to digitize newspapers. So we have tens of thousands of reels of, they're mostly on microfilm because that lasts longer. And so we have newspapers published in Indiana from before we were a state all the way up to the present. We're still collecting newspapers that are published in Indiana today.
Wow.
Um, and so we archive those, we keep them and preserve them for the future. And they're an amazing resource because you can learn about everyday life through them, but you can also learn about, you find obituaries, you find wedding announcements, you find, especially in the smaller towns, they didn't have a lot of news every day. And so they would publish things like local church picnics or birthday parties for really elderly citizens. And so you find all these things of what people were doing. They'll publish like bridal showers and tell you every gift that people brought,
Wow.
which I don't know if I'd want to be called out in the newspaper in case I didn't spend very much money, but it's really cool if like your great great grandmother had a wedding shower and you can find out what people gave her. So
Yeah.
it's stuff you don't get in the other records that are all very like factual. And so this just helps, you'll find the old wedding stories where they tell you like what the bride wore and they tell you what the bridesmaids wore. And if you don't have any photographs of that, that's a really cool description. So
Yeah.
it just gives you these human touches for people on top of the factual news. And then, of course, if your ancestor was ever in court for any reason, civil or criminal, you're going to get details about that, which is always, that's the juicy stuff that we're really here for.
Hmm.
But that's really, so this is really fun, and you never know what you're going to find. And it's exciting. And then the third thing that really awesome resource is we are a Family Search affiliate library, which Family Search is a free online database. You just have to create a free account with an email address, and anyone can access it from home. But if a library is an affiliate library, they have access to resources that you can't get at home because of Family Search's contracts with the actual record owners. So we have a ton of Indiana records, births, marriages, deaths, land records, wills and probates, just any kind of record, court records that you can't access at home because of the contracts. And so you can come here and get them on our computers. And Family Search has been rolling out some new technology where they're using computers to index handwriting. We've had computer indexing for typewritten documents for decades, but they finally made it so it could analyze handwriting. And
Oh, wow.
so, yeah, you can keyword search records that were never searchable before. So it's given us access to so many records that weren't indexed or were only indexed by like the main person. So they might be indexed by the person who wrote their will, but now you can search for any person named in that will. And so it just has completely blown research wide open. And you don't have to go page by page by page by page hoping you see something. You literally just type and it brings up what you're looking for. Or not if there isn't a record, but that's part of the research is you don't know what you're going to find. But yeah, we in our research for our families and also patrons we've had come in, they're finding all sorts of documents that would have been very hard to locate otherwise. And so, yeah, and then I'll just throw in a fourth bonus resource. Um, I think our librarians are one of our best resources because um, if we don't know where to find an answer, we're going to keep looking until we figure it out. If your question would be best answered by another library, like maybe the local public library in the small town where your ancestors were from, or if you're actually researching people from another state, maybe their state library has resources we don't. Nobody has everything. We're
Right.
going to figure out who you need to talk to get where you need to be. And so that's always really awesome. Just getting people where they need to be.
Absolutely. I always tell people that I'm a reference librarian at heart. So you ask me a question and I don't know it, I will find it
Oh
or
yeah.
find who will can answer it for you just because that was one of my favorite things to do is just like the research. Not necessarily for like genealogy,
Hmm.
but in other aspects. But I'm getting a better appreciation for it, especially kind of wanting to find my family history because
Hmm.
I have a kind of a small family. We don't have all the records, so maybe I'll do a deep dive sometime soon for that.
Yes. Yes. Do it.
I'm not sure I'm not sure I want to find out some things. I found out some things now that my mom has passed and I'm like, I didn't know that and
Hmm. That's that's always the risk that sometimes you don't want to know.
yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah,
but it
you
is
never know until
interesting.
you look.
That's true. But I didn't know about the death certificate thing.
Mhm.
That's just such a
Yeah.
prominent thing now that, when somebody
Hmm.
passes, you get the death certificate because you need it for everything, your bank,
Hmm.
all this different stuff. And to
Hmm.
to
And
find out
birth,
that you didn't need that,
yeah. And
weird.
birth certificates were the same. They follow the
Mm,
same date ranges. So yeah, that's part of why once you get past those dates, and all states in the US started issuing birth and death certificates at roughly the same time, it just became a thing. Um, that's why the further back you go, the more you're having to piece together research from multiple documents to like make an argument and prove a point, as opposed to just finding a document that spells out like, here's the person and here's their parents. And it
yeah.
makes it fun, but it also makes it harder.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't know that about that. So that's really interesting to find out that, some people weren't given birth certificates or
Yep.
death certificates or
Yep.
anything like that. So that does make it a little more challenging, but we always like a challenge, right?
Yes.
So those are some great resources. I'm so glad that you're able to like kind of tell people more about that. But for like the family search, you said you do need to come to the state library to be able to access that,
Yes.
correct? Okay.
There are affiliate libraries all over, and actually becoming an affiliate library is free, and the process is really simple. So there's always more libraries joining. If you go to the Family Search website, you can put in your local public library and see if they're a member as well. A lot of Indiana libraries are.
Okay, that's great. That's great to
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
Awesome. So, what do you find to be the most rewarding part of your job?
Helping people find what they're looking for, especially when they've been looking for a long time. Um, and some of that is sometimes it's just helping people have a different perspective. Like we've had people come in and answer their own question because by the time they articulate their question to the librarian on the desk, they're like, "Oh, I figured out what I need to do." Just like talking it out.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of people who do genealogy, like no one in their family is interested, unfortunately. So they come and talk to us about it. And then some of it is just connecting people to the resources because there's so much genealogy on paper, on microfilm, on the internet, and there's always more being added to the internet. And so just being able to help people connect to the resources that are going to answer their question. Because if you're just doing it as a hobby, you don't necessarily know what's out there, or we have access to so many subscription databases here that you can buy all of them and have them at home, but you'd spend, hundreds of dollars every month. And so just being able to come here and access them at no charge really helps people because it can get really expensive, and so just being able to get to those and finding what they're looking for. Um,
Yeah, I I think that that's probably one of the most rewarding things, even for
Yeah.
myself, when I worked with the public, was that, just even the, I need this form or I need this, just to be able to
Mhm.
help them, because a lot of times they'd already been given the runaround to like
Yes.
find it, and by the time they reach the library, they're frustrated, and
Mhm.
they just need somebody to help guide them. So that was always
Yes.
very rewarding when they'd be like, "Thank you
Yes.
so much for, just sometimes even just listening to,
Mhm.
even if we weren't able to get it for them, but just to kind of help them find where they needed to go." And like I said, with all the vast information that is out on the internet, and you don't always know what is legitimate and what's not. So just kind of having
Mhm.
somebody else's, like you said, perspective on that as well to help guide them is really great.
Mhm. Oh, yeah, and we've started in the past couple years branching out into more recent records, the sorts of things that will become genealogical records in a couple generations. So people need, their own birth certificate, their own marriage license, their own divorce record because they're, getting their real ID driver's license or applying for Social Security or what have you. And so helping people find those records, it's the same research techniques as the old records. It's a little bit harder because not all of those are online because of privacy laws, which is a good thing, but can make it harder if you're doing legitimate work.
Hmm.
But, um, just being able to figure out, "Okay, this is the office that has this record. You need to call this phone number. You need to talk to this person." Because there's so many different offices that you have to go to for official paperwork, and so just figuring that out has been really awesome, and figuring out where you can find indexes to things, and sometimes we're helping people find their own divorce dates by looking at the case filings in the newspapers.
Wow.
And it's like, "Okay, here we are." So, yeah, just like, "Okay, where can I look to find this? What do I have out there?"
Even just like finding diploma records could be kind of a
Yes.
challenge, because
Yes.
you would call and they'd be like, "Oh, well, that school burnt down or something," and
Mhm.
then, the records are moved here or they're there, and
Yes.
you're like, "Wow, okay."
Yes.
So,
Sometimes we've used yearbooks to try to even narrow down, like, if someone's not 100% sure, like, if they moved a lot and they're not 100%
mhm,
sure at this point. um, we work a lot with older people who don't remember, what they were doing 70 years ago, and so it's like,
right.
"Okay, here's your yearbook," and then it's just fun seeing people's pictures and things.
Oh, absolutely. I don't remember what I was doing yesterday, so don't ask me what I would
Nope.
be. But looking at the older yearbooks was always fun, just to see the different hairstyles and the
Mhm.
clothes and
Yes.
different things like that. So yearbooks are important.
They're so
I
much
think,
fun.
yeah, I think it's sad that some schools are kind of going away from that, or doing different
Mhm.
things with it, and not having like a just a copy. So I'm
Yep.
glad when some schools are still doing the yearbook, because like I said, it really is like a piece of history.
Mhm.
You can see who your teachers were, or who,
Yep.
who was in that time. So I think that's
Yes.
great. So one question that I ask all of my guests, because I love to read, not that everybody does, and that's fine if you don't. I know you do, but
Yes.
what are you reading or listening to right now?
I typically have 8 or 9 books going at the same time, but I didn't write all the titles down, so I'm not gonna sit here and rattle them all off. But one book I'm currently reading is The Art of Fermentation by Sandor Katz, and it's essentially a recipe book slash science book about home fermentation and home canning. I've had a lot of fun with it. I made sauerkraut. It was really awesome. Um,
Awesome.
yeah, and so just reading about, like, what happens when you ferment things on, like, a chemical level, like a molecular level, has been really interesting. I work in history, but I love science too, so, I love food science. So, that's been really fun to read about. all the different things you can do. I don't think I'm ready to try microbrewing yet, but the sauerkraut was a good first project.
So is that a nonfiction book then?
Yes.
So
Yes, it's essentially a cookbook.
do you tend to read more nonfiction over fiction, or do you do a mix?
Probably about 50-50.
Okay. Um, I love cookbooks. I love
Mhm.
to cook. I love to bake. I have thought about like dabbling in canning, but it seems kind of daunting for me.
Yeah.
Is it easier than what I'm kind of making it in my head that it's like really hard?
Um, as long as you follow the instructions, you're fine. And I do water bath canning because pressure cookers scare me.
I would probably do that. I helped with canning a lot when I was little, but
Mm,
you're not really like retaining that process. And I
no.
know that my aunt would do um
Mhm.
the water. I don't think yeah, we didn't do a pressure cooker,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm like I should really just like look into that to start canning some of my own vegetables and stuff, but it just seems so I don't know, hard.
Yeah. Yeah. I just
um
dabble. I don't do it extensively, but it's fun to play with.
yeah, absolutely. It is. Cooking is a science. You put a little too much of something in and it completely can ruin the recipe, or a little
Mhm.
too little of something can also make it where it doesn't taste good. So
Yep.
there's definitely a science to that, but I'll have to look into that book. Maybe it'll help motivate me to start
Mhm.
canning.
Yep.
Especially with the summer coming and all the, vegetables and stuff will be in season. So,
Mhm.
but I want to thank you so much for joining me today on this Tuesday. Um, the sun is shining where I'm at, but I don't know what
Yep.
the weather feels like. I'm ready for some sun and some warmer temperatures because it's just been kind of
Yes.
cold and rainy. So,
Yes.
thank you so much for joining me. It was lovely to have you on Tea Time with Librarians, and yeah, that's all I have for
Yeah.
today.
You're welcome. It was great to be here.